Shalom, shalom, Israel, shalom. It's Brother Raya. Want to give all honor and glory to the Most High God, Yahweh, Bahashima Mashiach, Malak Yahushua. Another strong shalom to all of the mighty brothers that go out there and labor on the highways and byways, making their body living sacrifice. In the rain, the tumults, the demons, the uprises, the uproars out there standing 10 toes down for the name of the Lord. Another strong shalom to all that are mighty brothers that are not out there as of yet, but they're building themselves up, reading, praying, fasting, doing everything they could do to put themselves in a position to go out there to shake the hand, to wake up the hopeful elect. Another strong shalom to all that are mighty aquaf in this thing, to actually sincerely reverence the husbands, being teachers of good things to the children at home, being quiet, shamefaced, submissive, loving, steadfast, cooking, sewing, cleaning, doing all of the righteous acts for our foremothers, on fire for the Lord. Another strong shalom to all that are mighty aquaf that are not married as of yet, but building themselves up, reading, praying, fasting, doing everything they could do to magnify the Most High and the ministry. Another strong shalom to all of the mighty children in this thing, abstaining from all lust, concupiscence, and peer pressure, standing 10 toes down for the name of the Lord. And last but not least, another strong shalom to the 12 tribes scattered abroad, reading, praying, fasting, magnifying the Most High and His beloved Son, Yahweh Shah. But this is going to be an in-depth breakdown on the Roman Jewish wars, right? And an untold history and foresaid evils that have happened, man. Right? We're going to dive straight into it. Because there's a lot of history that we don't know about that we have to learn in the last days. We just can't be content, just knowing the world is going to end in World War III. We have to dive into the days of old, man. We're actually commanded to go into the days of old. Matter of fact, let me get this in the book of Psalms. Let's go to the book of Psalms, chapter 77. It's the book of Psalms, chapter 77, and verse number 5. I have considered the days of old, the years of ancient times. Why? Because history is going to teach you. Not only is history going to teach you, it's going to teach you many of things, man. It's going to teach you your forefathers, your history, right where you came from, your beginnings, your origins. It's going to teach you about these nations, right? When you go into history, you can read about us having war against Amalek from the very foundation. You can see about the hatred that we've had with the Philistines from the very foundation. You can see about our strength, conquering these nations, used to being kings, governors, and princes. You can see a lot by understanding ancient times. And ancient times isn't 400 years ago. It isn't just 500 or 600 years ago. There are thousands of years of history that we're just learning about right now. When you come into this truth isn't just you're an Israelite and you're just better than everybody and better than all the nations, man. You have to dig and dig because these nations, they know their history. From the time they were 3 years old, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way out to the time when they've been an adult, they've been taught about these things. They know about BC, AD, they know about their wars, they know about the things that they have done, and all of the wars that they have won, the belligerents, the times that they conquered nations. They know about these things. And it builds a self-confidence about you when you know about yourself. But you know nothing about yourself but BET, cookouts, and carnal wicked history, right? That's thrown in your face as you are forced into these educational systems. And you know nothing about your ancient kings. It builds a lack of respect for yourself. That's why the Most High said these things. I call to remembrance my song in the night. I commune with my own heart, and my spirit made diligent search. You have to make diligent search in the last days of history and things which we have been through as a nation of people. Right? Let's dive straight into it through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua. Now you have many wars that have kicked off right during this time of what they would call the New Testament. During that time around 4 BC, all the way out when King Herod or Herod the Great came into power, right? Taking it down from the Hasmonean dynasty. When you go into this, you have the Judas, right, of Galilee uprising, what they would call that in history. These are your so-called Jewish revolts. When you go from 4 BC all the way down, right, when you continue to go to the third, what they would call the third Jewish Roman War. So you have the Judas of Galilee uprising in 4 BC, right, and 6 CE. Now, what this is talking about, and we're not going to necessarily cover all of these, we're going to stick on the main point, but I just want to show you there's one thing in common when you go through the Jewish Roman wars and the uprisings and the rebellions and the revolts going against the so-called white man, right? Going against the Romans. It's really one thing in common. You know what that is? It's money. Money is the main reason why a lot of wars kick off and devouring nations and invading lands is for oil, currency, right? Natural resources. It's for covetousness and guile. And it's all after the filthy lucre of money. Let's go to the mighty book of Acts. You can actually read about this in the book of Acts, right? Let's go to the mighty book of Acts real fast, right? This is the mighty book of Acts, right? Chapter 5 and verse number 36. It says, before these days rose up Thaddeus, boasting himself to be somebody, to whom a number of men, about 400, joined themselves and were slain, and all as many as obeyed him. Why? Because this is what you call an uprising, an uproar, a rebellion. See, it was a lot of rebellions during the time of the New Testament, man. We're not a people to just get down and lay down. It says, were scattered and brought to naught. Why? Because the Lord wasn't the head of the battle. These men took it in their own account, their own mentality, and through their own force to go to war against the so-called white man and to rise up against him. Verse 37 is the point. After this, right, man rose up Judas of Galilee. See, Judas of Galilee is what they would call one of the main men, if not the one that started, right, what they would call the Zealots. Now, the Zealots were a set during the New Testament that rose up for war. And we're going to touch on them, you understand, later on in the lesson, most are willing. It says, in the days of taxing. What do you mean in the days of taxing? See, the days of taxing were very strenuous for the Israelites. Very, very strenuous. Why? Because you did a lot of robbing in the days of taxing. They did a lot of evasions. There were a lot of wars that kicked off and brewed off and sets that were formed during the days of taxing. During the days of taxing is a very important part of the New Testament. See, when you read the New Testament, it's beautiful. All that red letter. It's beautiful when you go into the 12. You understand? You're going into different things. The woman cast on her might and all of the healings that Yahweh Shai did through the spirit and power of the Most High God. But you also have to know history. You don't want to read this book and negate all of the history of what's actually going on in the New Testament. It says in the days of taxing and drew much people after him, meaning it was a rebellion. He also perished, and all, even as many as obeyed him, right, were dispersed, right, meaning kicked out, destroyed. Now, even him, he had a son, right, named Judah, right, and Simon, right, I believe around 40 something, right, when you go into a CE, following right after the footsteps of his father, Judas of Galilee. And it was an uprising and an up rebellion and destruction going on during these times. Right, let me go back to it, right? Jacob and Simon, like I just said, around about 46, CE or so. You had the Jewish revolt, right? Against Gallus, right? Since he is Gallus, right? From 351 to 52. The Samaritan revolt. You had many revolts going on, but during the days of taxing in the New Testament, you had 1,000 things going on. Let's dive into it, right? This is 6 CE. Right? It says Judas led the revolt against the Roman governor, right? Compius, and the census imposed by Publius Cornelius, right? Judas and Zodak, the Pharisees, urged the Jewish people, right, to resist the census, urging that it was a religious sin to submit to Roman authority. Judas' followers targeted those who did register for the census. These revolts led to violent wars. So what was the wars really the stem when you go from, and this is even before we get to 66, right, to 70 AD. This is before we even get, but see, you have to know the history of it brewing up. See, a fight don't just really start by you just eyeing somebody. It starts with eyeing and who you looking at, whisperings, tumults, a push, a shove, people getting involved, somebody saying, well, he said this. Next thing you know, you in the back of the school, man, fighting behind a trash can. From the time of 4 to 6 CE, all the way to the time of 66 AD, all the way out, these things were kicking off for all of the censors, the taxings, and the evadings of the temple that was going on by the Roman Empire. It said these revolts led to violent wars, famines, murders, and the burning down of the temple. The revolts are discussed in the Jewish Roman War, right, and Antiquities of Jews by Josephus, and are also mentioned in Acts of the Apostles, right? Diving into it. Judas of Galilee, one more link on this before we dive into it, was a Jewish leader, right, who led resistance of the census, right? Going into what? The taxation. It says imposed for Roman tax purposes by Cornelius in Judea province in 6 ECE. So those men said, look, we're not bowing down. We're not going to sit here. We're not going to pay you, man. Now, you have what they would call the Jerusalem riots in 66. It says, according to Josephus, the violence of the year 66 initially began at Caesarea. So Caesarea was one of the main points when you go into what they would call the Jewish Roman wars kicking off. It stemmed from Caesarea. It says provoked by Greeks of a certain merchant house, right, sacrificing birds in front of a local synagogue. Now, when you go into the history, like I said, which we're going to dive into, you had Herod, what they would call the Great. He built many temples, right? He built the Western Wall, right, in Jerusalem, and he built up a lot of things, not because he wanted to see Jerusalem flourish, not because he loved the Jews, because when you take down a nation, you make it your own, meaning he built fortresses all in Jerusalem. So if anybody would come, because they had many Roman provinces, and you can make anything your base. Like if America invaded, let's say Iraq, they would build fortresses all around Iraq. So if anybody would come, they would already have a fortress. So the Roman province was extremely great, right? From Gallia, Hispania, to Italy, to Romania, right? The capital, Sicilia, right? Macedonia, Bithynia, Cappadocia, Mesopotamia, right? All the way to, our people, right? Judea and Jerusalem. So what he was doing was he was building fortresses and a stronghold in Jerusalem. When you're going into it, right? Let me go back to it. It says, begin at Caesarea, provoked by Greeks of a certain merchant house, sacrificing birds in front of a local synagogue. The Roman garrison did not intervene there, and thus the long-standing Hellenistic and Jewish religion tension took a downward spiral in reaction of one of the Jewish temples, right? Jumping down, it says protests over taxation. So what was this all over? Taxation, money, power, right? Let me get a quick precept. Let's go to the mighty book. And the Romans left the authority in Jerusalem given to the Pharisees for a specific reason. So you may read the New Testament and say, well, why does it seem like we govern ourselves? We're not really that oppressed by the Romans before the siege and the drawing of blood, and why things are delicated the way that they were in the New Testament. Let's go to the mighty book of John, the 11th chapter. See, they did that so they could have control over the temple and the taxings and the money. That's exactly why they did that. History and the precepts are going to show you that. It's the book of Rome. So, like, this is the book of John, chapter 11, and I'm going to start at 45. It says, then many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which I did believed on him. But some of them went their ways to the Pharisees and told them what things Yahushua had done. Then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees a council and said, what do we? For this man doeth many miracles. If we let him thus alone, meaning if we leave him alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans shall come and take away both our place and nation. What does this mean? Meaning, if all men start to worship Yahweh Shai, the Romans wouldn't look at us as having reign over our people, because there will arise another man that people will govern to be likened higher than the Pharisees. So their main point wasn't to reverence Yahweh Shai because of the miracles which they couldn't deny, because of he was the Son of God, which some of them knew and secretly believed. But they didn't want the Romans to take away their place. Their place is their authority. The authority over the temple, the authority over the taxations, the authority over all of the people. See, if the Romans would know that, they would take away the Pharisees. thus their power and their position. And they knew that. So they said, look, man, we can't have Yahweh Shai to continue to grow. That was more of a reason to kill him. Hatred, evil, envy, all because of power and covetousness. Like the Lord said, man, let me get this quick precept. It's what the Lord said, man. See, the love of money is the root of all evil. And the Lord wasn't lying when he said that, man. Think about a lot of arguments, a lot of breakups and marriages, and a lot of stem of rebellion and witchcraft and robbery. It all stems after money. Look at Antiochus Epiphanes IV, man. How he invaded Egypt. How he did these things, taking down Ptolemy and all invading lands taken from their treasuries. How he paid off men for a whole year. And we're going to dive into that too. Because money wins wars. It gains power. Right? This is the book of 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse number 9. It says, but they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, into many foolish and hurtful lusts. Like what? Gain, rising yourself over the Lord. It says, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all evil. See, that's why the spirit of Esau is my God is fine gold. That's why Esau named his son Eliphaz. Eliphaz means my God is fine gold. So that's what's in Esau's mind: gold, covetousness, power, authority, renownness, glory. These things are deeply rooted within him, and he wants to covet land and take them by violence. That's the spirit of the so-called white man. See, that spirit hopped on men that want preeminence and glory, right? So let me go back to this link, right, from Josephus. It says, protests over taxation joined the list of grievance and random attacks on Roman citizens. So the Jews said, you know what? I'm sick of this taxation. I'm sick of this rising up and all hell breaking loose. So the people during that time, they started to attack Roman citizens, and they started to wage war in weight and number, meaning not as far as 66 all the way out, as extreme as it was, but they started to wage war against the Romans, man. Right? A civil war. It said, and perceived traitors occurred in Jerusalem, meaning it was a division. Some people served the Romans and wanted the best for them. Certain people rebelled. It says tension reached a breaking point when Roman governor Gassius Florus, which is a very important part of history going into the siege. See, this man kicked off a major part, right, of the siege when you go into it, right, which was this Roman governor. It says, sent Roman troops to remove 17 talents from the temple treasury. Why did he do that? When you go into history, he did that because he knew the infinite sums of money that Jerusalem had. Now, Jerusalem will bring forth an abundance of gold, silver, and money that was willingly offered because it was in our spirits to give to the widows and the fatherless. See, the so-called white man don't have a treasury. He don't sit there and say, you know what? You know, Rome, Britain, and all of the, all of the Dutch, the Italian, they all come together of one mind of love to take care of one another. No, they rape, pillage, and divide, just like the Spanish and the French and all of the different wars that kicked off for the covetousness of the land of America. See, they're a nation divided. Us, when you go into history, we're commanded to do that, man. You actually have to. That's a commandment. Let's go to Second Esdras. So they knew our laws. They knew the spirit we were in. So they didn't have to forcefully, I guess, rob at a certain extent because of the spirit that was in Jerusalem. That's why they said, look, it's working in order. They're already giving us money. The Pharisees are already governing the treasury. Everything's working in order. We're getting our money. You know what? It is what it is. We'll let them have their so-called reign and power, and we'll be sitting over top of them. To the point where this man, Gaius, let me get this real fast. Right, Florus, this man had an evil suspicion. He said, you know what? They holding back money in there. It got to be something else in that treasury. Why they take it so long in there, man? Who the hell's all the way in the back? And spirits started rising, and more governors after him had the same evil suspicions to the point where they invaded the temple. They wanted to see what the hell was back there. Right? Let me get this quick precept. Let's go to Second Esdras, chapter 2. right? In verse number 20, do right to the widow. So we have to do right to the widow, right? Even in First Timothy, the 5th chapter, verse 8 all the way down, the Lord said, if any provide not for his house, he is worse than an infidel, paraphrasing greatly. What is that talking about in context? It's really talking about the widow, because who else is going to take care of her? Who else is going to provide for the widow? That's why we have treasuries. That's why we take care of our people. Judge for the fatherless. Give to the poor. How was the poor given to? By the treasury. Defend the orphan, clothe the naked. Clothes didn't appear out of nowhere. All of this was governed by our fathers when we had a big treasury that all of the nations they knew about, man. Like I said, all of this stems from covetousness and power. Let's go to the mighty book, right? Let's go to Second Maccabees. Let me get this quick precept. Second Maccabees chapter 3, and I'm gonna start at verse number 6. It says, and told him that the treasury in Jerusalem was full of infinite sums of money. So these nations, they got the kick, they got the drop, right, by the high priest and different men, that the treasury was filled with infinite sums of money, so that the multitude of their riches, which not pertain to the account of the sacrifices, was innumerable. Meaning their sacrifices they may do a day didn't account for how much money they really had. They could have did 7 times more sacrifices. And that it was possible to bring all into the king's hands. See, these kings, they watch and they know, right? Now when Apollonius, right, came to the king and had shewed him the money whereof he was told, the king chose out Heliodorus, right, his treasurer, and sent him with commandment to bring him the aforesaid money. And when you read Maccabees, you already know what happened to Heliodorus, man. The angel came down and cut him in two. So that goes to show you touching our money, because this money isn't our money. It's for the fatherless. It's for the widow, right? It's for the clothed, the poor, the naked, the distraught, men that need help. So when this man Gaius Florus, right, sent Roman troops to remove 17 talents from the temple treasury. Now 17 talents today will equate to around $2 million. So when he invaded, you understand, the temple, imagine getting robbed for $2 million, man. Imagine getting robbed, man, for $2 million. It says claiming the money was for unpaid taxes. That was his mentality, man. What is something else back there, like I was saying. Look, what else y'all got back there, man? You know what? Y'all owe more. With these taxes, it's more y'all need to pay, man. So when Judas of Galilee, all the way from 6 CE, all the way from the time we reading about now, 66 going into 70 AD, it was brewing up about money, about spirits, about invasions. And the money is the root of all evil. So this man said, you know what? I got to see what's back there. In response to this action, the city of Jerusalem fell into unrest, and some of the Jewish population began openly mocking Florus by passing a basket around to collect money as if it was Florus for the poor. They started mocking him, man. Right? Now let me dive into this. This is Caesarea, right? The temple that they're going into, that these things happening to, right? Same place when Yahweh Shah said, well, who do man say that I am? See, different parts in the New Testament, everything didn't happen in Judea specifically. You had Samaria, you had Galilee. You had different parts where different actions in the New Testament was going on. So you would have this temple, right, that they built. Now check this out. Why did Herod build Caesarea? Now he really built Caesarea to show his allegiance unto Caesar. That's why he called it Caesarea, right? To show his allegiance to his emperor, amongst other things of robbery, stealing, pillaging, building up temples and fortresses for covetousness, right? But that just so happened to be over the same region and realm that the Romans were over. That's why all these things were getting built up in the New Testament. Herod the Great has several political, and economical reasons to build his new capital. Each of these reasons had their own effect on the city that Herod built. Herod had two political moves, right? Motives. First, by naming his city after his patron, the Emperor Augustus. He dramatically announces his loyalty to the emperor. Herod's second motive was to prove his Hellenized subjects that he was not a Jewish king. Look, I'm not for y'all, but an Hellenized king, meaning he was for what Seleucus, right? He was for them. He's for their motives. It says that was part of being Hellenistic king that one patronage the arts of building cities. He built Caesarea, a Greco-Roman style, in contrast to the Jewish city of Jerusalem. Thus, his Hellenized subjects would feel more at home in the new city, right? Now, I'm going to read a little bit down right here. Building many fortresses, palaces, temples, baths, the city of Caesarea. So that's what he did. Why? Because he wanted to build fortresses, palace, temples. All this was building up. So why you had the rich, the Pharisees, which pled allegiance, the wicked ones to Caesar, right, to Herod. They had many benefits. And any man that takes bribes and benefits, like the Lord said, beware of a gift, paraphrasing greatly. See, no man should be taking gifts. When you get a new job and, just work the Shabbat, we'll give you a $13 raise. You know what? Double overtime. They start bribing you with these gifts. You start perverting judgment. Next thing you know, you moving like those wicked men at the time, and they didn't want their place to be taken away. See, they were okay with being in captivity. Why? Because they lived good in captivity, man. See, a lot of people live good in captivity. You got your Ben Carsons, right? He lives good in captivity. Your so-called black men, your Oprahs, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, they're not feeling the oppression of the poor. Why? Because they biting the cheese. They taking the bribes. And they're living healthy in this society, right? Let me get this quick precept. Let's go to the mighty book of Matthew. Let's go to Matthew chapter 17. It's Matthew chapter 17 and verse 24. And when they would come to Capernaum, they that received tribute money came to Peter and said, doeth not your master pay tribute? So it was a big spirit of you paying to the Romans during the New Testament, man. Are you paying? Nor are you paying? Maybe not. Are you with, the Zealots? What are you doing? Are you getting down with the Pharisees? It was a lot of sets, division, and what you ought to do. It wasn't just a random question to asking the Lord, are you just going to, give money to Caesar? What significance is that to ask the King of Kings and the master? See, he's a master of Israel, right? Meaning a teacher and the teacher of Israel. So they're coming to him to try to find out all these matters. What's right to do. He saith, yes. And when he was come into the house, Yahushua prevented him, saying, what thinkest thou, Simon? Of whom do kings of the earth take custom or tribute? Of their own children or of strangers? Peter saith unto him, of strangers. Let you know we're the strangers to them, huh? We're the outcasts. It's not for us to allege ourselves with them to build up their empire. No, we're just going to pay what we owe, understanding we're strangers and captives under the Romans. Yahweh Shah saith unto him, then are the children free, man. Right? Meaning, are you really free? No, we're not free, man. Yeah, we're captives. But like I said, you have certain men that berate themselves high up of renown during that time. Let's go to the mighty book. Let me get this quick precept in Mark. Right, let me get another one on that. It's the book of Mark, chapter 12, and verse number 41. And it reads, Yahushua sat over against the treasury, and behold, how the people cast money into the treasury. So who's watching this? The Roman officers, the generals, the governors. They're seeing these things. And no heathen is allowed in the temple, right? Now, when you go into this, so it was a big mystery in their mind of what the hell is back there, man. Yeah, they heard of things, and the only way to really go back there is to invade it. So if you see day in and day night, they're casting in mites, gold, penny, this, trackerums. They throwing all of these different things and they're trying to figure out, well, what the hell is back there? Cast money into the treasury, and many that were rich cast in much. So everybody's seen the spirit that was going into this treasury. Now, if the so-called white man is going to tax you and he knows you have money, you think he's going to tax you a little or a lot? See, I may get taxed because I'm poor a little, but I'm still getting robbed. But LeBron James, when he buys a house, or his taxes may be over much. So he's seen the treasury to invade, saying that they owe taxes, which he couldn't prove. It says, and there came a certain poor widow, and she threw in two mites, right? Which make a fatherman, right? She was poor. And he called into his so like his disciples and said unto them, verily I say unto you, that this poor widow have cast in more and than all they which have cast into the treasury. Because you had during the New Testament, let me get this real fast. You had something called the court of treasury. It says the treasury of the temple was a court in Jerusalem. You had the women's court, you had the court of treasury, you had the court where they did sacrifices. You had off to the side the western wall. You had the 15th legion, the 12th legion. You had three walls right there were governed. You understand, and fortificated. You had all these different. You had the gates right before the temple. So the way this thing was mapped out, they had different levels. So you like I said, you can't just go back there. You had the court of the Gentiles that was without. It says the court, so like the treasury of the temple, was a court in Jerusalem. During Bible times, it was located east of the temple, below Nicanor Gate, and overlooked the Mount of Olives. Right? The Salakia. Let me get this real fast. See, you have the court of women. It's where the women reside. You go back there, right? And then you would go, and then you would have a set part where they would have what they would call, right, the Sanhedrin, where they would go back there. Like I said, we're not going to dive too much into this mapping that layout, but it was big back there. The court of the Gentiles is without. See, that's without. But then you go in, and then you will have the holy place, the altar, right? The court for Israel, the golden gate, the woman's court, the court for the Pharisees, where they would hold Sanhedrins. You have these different parts, right, of this wall and this court during that time, right? So going back to it, I'm going to read this again. It says, Florus collected taxes in Jerusalem, right? Yes, Gaius Florus, the Roman governor of Judea, collected taxes in Jerusalem. Florus demanded 17 talents of gold from the treasury, the temple, to pay for unpaid taxes. Right? That's a lie. Right? The massacre, the Roman soldiers killed more than 3,600 Jews, regardless of age or sex. Many were also scourged and crucified. The massacre led to the first Jewish revolt. So before you even dive into 66 AD, all the way to 70 AD, right? It's good to know the history of what was brewing up during that time. What Yahweh Shai was asked. How would he move about that? Why the Pharisees loved their position so much, and understanding the history of why these things were even so. It says the revolt ended with the Romans breaking through the wall of Jerusalem, slaughtering and enslaving the remained Jews. Florus was known for his greed and hatred of the Jews. Well, that doesn't surprise me, man. What white man isn't greedy? What man doesn't want filthy lucre? He was a procurator, a foreigner appointed by the Roman emperor to rule the province and collect taxes. Right? Check that out. The procurators were only concerned with profit, and the more taxes they collected, the more money they could keep. So that's like your what's that word? We don't get paid commission. It's like the more he robbed and stealed and collected, the more his commission on the side was. So of course he was out for greed. Of course he wanted those things, man. Right now, diving into this says First Jewish-Roman War. Now I'm gonna dive straight to the point. It says the crisis escalated because of anti-taxation protests, man. So they're sitting up there protesting and protesting and protesting. Now you think we just wanted to riot? Think we just went off? See, a lot of sets that did get formed just went off, but a lot of people they just didn't want to pay. See, if the people right now, when the U.S. government made a law to where you have to work every single Saturday, where you have to work on the Shabbat, you have to work on this day, or you can no longer do this, people gonna riot, man. People gonna protest. That doesn't make us evil. That makes us want to keep the laws and protect the things that the Lord gave us. We wanted to protect the temple. See, the temple was all we had. And they let us have those things until this man Florus seized the money from the second temple. It says protests clash because Jews and pagans in mixed cities, the Roman governor Florus seized money from the second temple's treasury and arrested numerous seniors, Jewish figures. What does that mean? Men of renown, men of power, men of stature, the figures and the men that were high up. This prompted a widespread rebellion in Jerusalem, right? And culmination of the capture of Roman garrisons by rebel forces as a pro-Roman king, Herod Agrippa II, right? And Roman official, they fled. So when these things started to kick off, where was Herod Agrippa? He left. He got up out of there. He didn't stay, right? Now, I'm gonna dive into this real fast. This is what you would call the talents, right? And like the scriptures say, we had infinite sums of money. Right now, we don't even have our own banks, man. You can't even borrow money from your mother or your father without feeling bad. But we had bars of gold, man. Shekels. All types of money thrown up in there, man. From the poor to the rich. And that was even what you had to do in the law. Right? So we're forced as a people to give, man. If you're not giving, you're going off. You're literally going off. This is the book of Exodus chapter 30 and 12. When thou takest the sum of the children of Israel, meaning count them up, after their number, then shall they give every man a ransom for his soul unto the Lord. Unto the Lord, meaning unto the priest, going into the storehouse, right? Going into the temple. When thou numberest them, that there be no plague amongst them when thou numberest them. So you get jacked up and plagued, man, if you don't pay up. If you don't give to the Lord, you could get plagued and destroyed. Right? And a man that doesn't give, and a man that didn't do these laws and did his own thing, a lot of the times were strangers. You had righteous strangers, like, they were just alienated or whatever the case may be. You had certain men that were just eunuchs or they were poor, they fell on hard times, right? And they can join back. But then you had a lot of men that wanted to do what they wanted to do, man. They didn't want to follow Moses. They lived the life of a vagabond, spread abroad. But if you were in the congregation, you had to give. These that they give every one that passeth among them that are numbered, half a shekel after the shekel of a sanctuary. A shekel is 20 gerts, and a half a shekel shall be the offering, right, of the Lord. So the Lord's telling you, every one that passeth among them that are numbered from 20 years old and above shall give an offering unto the Lord. The rich shall not give more, then the poor shall not give less than a half a shekel, when they give an offering unto the Lord to make an atonement for your souls, right? It says, and thou shalt take the atonement money of the children of Israel and shall appoint it, right, for the service of the tabernacle. So they would take this money and they would have it for the service of the tabernacle. Things don't just come out of nowhere, man. Right? You have to pay people and you have to give wood and all these different things have to come about. It don't just come out of nowhere, man. Right? For the service of the temple, to maintain the temple. Right? You have coals. You have a lot of things that need to be taken care of the congregation, that it may be a memorial to the children of Israel before the Lord to make an atonement for your souls. right? Let's go to the mighty book. Matter of fact, let me go back to this link, going into the talents. So during this time, when this man taxationed, robbed the sanctuary, robbed the temple, took 17 talents out, right? The Sicarii rose up. Now, when the Sicarii rose up, which were so-called Jewish zealots, they went to war with the Roman soldiers during that time. And the Roman soldiers during that time, they took them down. They slew them and they killed them, right? And they pillaged them and they tried to take back the things that were stolen. And when that was happening, right, the Roman rule was shifted back to us for a very small point of time. Before they had to go back, you understand, to Titus and Vespasian to really start the war, to bring in legions and legions, which are Roman soldiers over 6,000, to really invade because it was out of their hands at that point. See, you have something like a governor ruling, but then the city is in an uproar. Now they have to get the president involved. Now they have to get the nobles involved. Now it really becomes a state of an emergency. Now other states and other damn provinces is coming in. Now this thing is getting serious and it's getting real. It says the Sicarii were a group of Jewish zealots who carried out targeted assassinations and kidnappings in the final decades of the Second Temple period. The term Sicarii comes from the Latin word Sicia, which means dagger. The Sicarii were considered to be more radical and violent, subject of the Zealots, a political movement that sought to expel the Roman Empire from the Holy Land. Yeah, they didn't sought to do what they did, man. They killed, removed, with bloodshed and violent, right? Those demons. But they didn't do it in measuring in time. See, the Most High didn't give you lead to do that. And when that happened, you had a man in history, and I'm going to dive into it, named Menahem ben Judah, of Salakia for the pronunciation. So during this time of the Sicarii, I want to take on this real quick point, right? Emboldened by his success, right? When they take down the Romans, he behaved himself as a king. Because like I said, when they removed the Romans via the hand of the Sicarii, they had reign for a second. And they felt like this thing was all over. Like I said, this is the history brewing up to 66, 70, all the way out. 70 AD with a final Jewish-Roman wars. You had one in history after that, Tico, which we're going to touch on as well. But nevertheless, it says he behaved as a king and claimed the leadership of all the troops. Thereby he aroused the enmity of Eleazar, another zealot leader, and met death as a result of a conspiracy against him. Meaning they, in history, they rose up against one another. And he got slew. So, I mean, Jake's always covetous for power. See, it didn't work because the Most High didn't make you king. Who are you to be a king? You have an Ananias spirit, an Adonijah spirit, right? Making yourself king. Right? David sitting up there sick on the bed, and you make yourself king, like Absalom. See, the Most High anoints you king. It's done before all Israel. Joshua didn't sneak and take the children of Israel to the land of Canaan. Moses put his hands upon him in front of the whole congregation. So you can't just become a king. These men that seek power and preeminence through glory, you understand, and leading of souls, those men always get brought down to naught, right? Like Thaddeus and other men when you go into it. Now, going back into this man, you had Gaius Cestitius, right? Gaius, the governor of Syria. Now, check this out. Gaius, right? I want to read this real fast. Was a proconsul of Syria from 63 to 65. He marched into Judea with a force over 30,000 men in September 66 in an attempt to restore the order at the outset of the first Jewish-Roman war. Now, this is all the Most High's design. But if the Sicarii never rose up to do what they did, the governor of Syria would have never got involved. And then Vespasian would have never got involved. And the first Jewish-Roman war, where they killed and pillaged all of Jerusalem, would have never happened. Now, if they would have, if you want to get even deeper, if they would have never robbed us, we would have never rose up, and spirits wouldn't have never continued amongst our people to fight them. But at the end of the day, we're given this portion. Yeah, no one likes to get whipped. No one likes to get hung. No one likes to get slaughtered. But to channel that spirit of anger into crying out to the Lord and keeping the commandments is way more profitable and wise than to channel it in a spirit of vengeance. Why? Because the Most High is not on the head of you. See, the Lord even said, if this were my kingdom, my servants will fight. Paraphrasing greatly, man. See, this is not his kingdom. Kingdom meaning rulership. Yahweh Shah came as a sheep, coming back as a lion. Like these nations are set to rule, that we may besought ourselves, repent, and come back to the Most High. So when these things happen, his main goal for coming into Jerusalem to really kick off this war was to set back in order the things that were destroyed. It says to restore order at the outset of the first, right, Jewish-Roman war, right, assembled at Antioch, right, right, Gallus' army compressed, right, detachments from three other legions, right? So the three legions, a legion, like I said, is a Roman army of around 6,000 soldiers, right? They had three legions because you had three walls amongst our our land, you know, amongst the temple. You had three walls in history. See if I can pull that up real fast. There you go, right here. That's the spirit. There is, let me just, evidence of at least three ancient walls surrounding the old city. Three ancient walls surrounding the old city of Jerusalem. That's why when they came with that military attack that we're going to dive into, they came from three sides. They took down the first and the western biggest wall, which is called the first wall in history. That's the one they took down last. They took down the first wall last, and I believe in history they took down the 15th legion and the 12th legion. Called the legion because it could hold 12 legions of Roman soldiers, 15 legions of Roman soldiers. Then you had the first wall. Let's go to it. Go back to it through the spirit. Right? Three other legions based in Syria. Right? It says, with his force reduced, right, by detachments sent occupy Galilee and the Judean coast. Right? Galtius returned into the inland to subdue Jerusalem after suffering loss. Right? Like I said, we're not going to read all of this, but you had Syria getting involved. See, a lot of people don't know that, you know, not just the Roman soldiers, but you also had Syrian soldiers that came also because you have allegiances, right, and alliances with these different nations. Now, kicking up and diving into the first Jewish-Roman war, because a lot of what we just touched on was history. We had to touch on it, right? We can't just dive into what happened, right? It says, and this is by Britannia.com. In the fall of 66, right, AD, the Jews combined a revolt and expelled the Romans from Jerusalem. We just read the history on that. We read why it happened, what was brewing up, what was the history, you know, and overwhelmed in the pass of Beth Horon, a Roman punitive force under Gallus. We just read about that man, right? A governor over Syria. And a partial letis in Syria, a revolutionary government was then set up. So a war doesn't just happen. War is strategic. It's planned out. Let me get the classic. Let's go to the book of Luke. See, everybody talking about push the button, push the button, push the button. See, the stage is already set. These kings are coming together. You understand? And they're strategically finding out how, when, and where things are going to go down. This is the book of Luke, chapter 14 and 31. It says, or what king going to make war against another king sitteth not down first and consulteth whether he will be able with 10,000 to meet him that cometh against him, right, with 20,000. Meaning these kings, they sit down. You know what they call it? They call it counsel. Counseling war is important, right? In a multitude of counselors, there is safety. Lord said in counsel, let me get this quick precept. It's the book of Proverbs, chapter 12 and verse number 6. It says, "For by wise counsel thou shalt make thy war." You don't just start war, right? They do it with wise counsel. But their counsel was on the left hand side. And in a multitude of counselors, there is safety, right? Diving into it, right? So like we jump in the gun, right? It says a revolutionary government was then set up and extended its influence throughout the whole country. Vespasian was dispatched by Roman Emperor Nero to crush the rebellion, man. So the emperor pushed off of Vespasian, you understand, to dive into this. That's how he was even called to get involved. Nero to crush the rebellion, right? And Nero, like I said, this was around the time you're going into the destructions and the burning of the church, the fire of Rome, right? The killing of Paul, 64, right? AD, and the different things that were going on. This demon was ruling. He was joined by Titus, and together the Roman army entered Galilee, where the historian Josephus headed the Jewish forces. Josephus' army, right, was confronted by that Vespasian and fled after the fall of the fortress, right? Now, I want to touch into something real fast. Salakia, I want to touch on something. And I want to dive into bit by bit, going into like the history, how this war actually happened. Right. So, like I said, this man got involved with Titus and Vespasian. Now, Titus and Slakia, Vespasian and Titus, right? Flavius had over 60,000 soldiers when they invaded the land. They invaded the land, right? The 14th at even before the Passover, man. That's literally when they invaded the land. So they did it strategic, knowing exactly when the Passover was. So they invaded us when we were at peace. We were about to keep the Lord's Passover. And they invaded us at night, right? So the war was waged at nighttime, the 14th at even. In three different directions was it warred, or was it waged, rather, right? And they could show through painted history, right, the wars, man. And this is the sodomy Esau paints, man. A grown man grabbing another man by the head and bending him over, man. You see them robbing the menorahs. Now, this is what they would call the beginning of the war. That caught us off guard, right? And all of these things was kicking off. I'm gonna come back to those links, right? So you have something called the Fifth Legion Wall of Jerusalem. It says the Fifth Legion was not directly involved with the walls of Jerusalem during the first Jewish-Roman War, but the ex-Phrynicis Legion did participate in the war. Titus and the Roman legions, right? So, like I said, you have these different legions, which were wars that were involved. Let's go to the 12th legion. I don't know if we're going to be able to pick up each one of these without, diving a little too deep. But again, like you had the 5th legion, which was the first wall. You had the 12th and the 15th legion, led by Titus, right? Which is the third outer wall. Now, these are the walls. Now, this goes into strategics of how they invaded the land. It wasn't just a bunch of nasty, creepy white men raging in war. They knew exactly which walls were where. Why? Because it was their providence. They already governed it. They knew where, what was what. Herod already built things. They already knew what was going on. So when they came, as they did, you understand, the wages war, they already knew the weak points, what can be invaded, what couldn't be invaded, what they needed more help, more forces with. So Titus, it was the third wall, right? And you had the 10th legion. Now, all of this was surrounded by hills, right? Let's go to this real fast in Psalms. Let me get this quick precept. Let's go to the mighty book of Psalms. All right. the book of Psalms, chapter 125, and I'm going to start at verse number 2. Right, and it reads, it says, as the mountains are round about Jerusalem, so the Lord is round about his people from henceforth, even forever. So they had many mountains around Jerusalem when they were waging war, which made it hard for those soldiers to really get in there because we're surrounded by walls and mountains and hills and valleys. Let's go to the mighty book of Judith. Let's go to Judith, the 4th chapter. This is Judith chapter 4, and I'm going to start at verse number 4. Then they sent into all the coasts of Samaria and the villages and Bethron and Belaman and Jericho and Chopah and Esperah and the valley of Salem, and possessed themselves beforehand of all the tops of the high mountains, and fortified the villages that were in them, and laid up victuals for the provision of war, for their fields were of late reaped. So it just goes to show you that we are surrounded round about mountains. You understand, valleys and hills. That actually helps us in war, right? Even the kings from the Old Testament, they knew these things, man. Let's go to First Kings. We get one more precept on that. First Kings chapter 20. Right, it's First Kings chapter 20. And I'm going to start at around 23. Right, get straight to the point. And the servant of the king of Syria said unto him, the gods are the God of the hills, man. We don't have the God of hills, right? See, Esau and these different nations, he's the God of thunder, the God of the waters, right? Israel has the God of the hills because it was hard to climb up to even get to us, man. See, when you're shooting off with archers, right, and you're having this military mindset and this attack, it's hard to breach a wall going up a hill. Since their gods are gods of the hills, therefore they were stronger than we. But let us fight against them in the plain, right? Meaning in the open field, and surely we will be stronger than they. So these nations that already know, you understand, about how we're governed in the attack methods to try to invade, right? You have something called the Beta Zeta or Zara. I'm going to get this real fast. If I could pull it up. This is where they had sling stones and a war was brewing around this region. It said if we could really get a good picture. It's not showing us too much of that climate of really what I wanted to dive into. But nevertheless, right, they had ramps and sling stones going into that history. Let's go to the mighty book of Luke. Let's go to Luke. Luke chapter 19. It's the mighty book of Luke chapter 19. And I'm going to start at verse number 41. Right? And it reads. It says, I'm going to write steep. Let's start at verse 40. Start at 41. And when he was come near, he beheld the city, talking about the Lord, and wept over it, saying, if thou hast known, even thou, at least in this day, the things which belong unto thy peace. But now they are hid from thine eyes. So Yahweh knew about the siege. He knew the things that were brewing up during his time, and he knew all things. For the day shall come upon thee that thine enemy shall cast a trench about thee. Now, when it says the enemy are the Romans. Casting a trench is a fortified area where you can't leave out of. That's casting a trench. See, if somebody casts a trench around me, I wouldn't be able to leave. I would die of starvation. There's no way I could flee. So the enemy, the Romans, were going to cast a trench round about thee and compass thee round and keep thee in. The keep thee in is the trench and the walls that they're building. See, we thinking that, you know what, we're behind that wall and they can't break in and we're good. But the Romans were one step ahead on the left-hand side to cast a trench about us. So even if they would leave, we couldn't escape and they could bring more and more soldiers. We couldn't get outside help, right? It says, round about thee and keep thee in on every side. And they shall lay thee even with the ground. Lay thee even with the ground, meaning when you read the book of Mark, the 13th chapter, there was all the stones, right, going to be laid to the ground. That's laying you even to the ground because all of the stones will be laid to the ground. So we're being likened to being laid down, just like our temple, and having no man remaining. This is Mark chapter 13 and verse number 1. And when he went out of the temple, one of his disciples said unto him, Master, see what manner of stones and what buildings are here. So we looking at all of the palaces, the things which we have built and what Herod have built on top of the things that we already possessed. And what buildings are here? The temple, the treasuries. And Yahweh answered and said unto him, Seest thou these great buildings? There shall not be left one stone upon another. That shall not be thrown down. Right? So they threw down all of the fortresses. That's what it's talking about when it says, and not leave indeed one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the day, it's like at the time of thy visitation. Right? And he went into the temple and began to cast them out that sold therein, and them that brought, right? Getting on them, huh? Right, in the temple of the Most High. Right, let's go back to it. I want to dive back into that history, and I want to dive into the book of Luke, the 21st chapter, right? Going into the siege, what actually was going down. It's the book of Luke, chapter 21, and verse number 20. And when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, it's the Roman armies, then know that the desolation thereof draweth nigh, right? The abomination of desolation, where they cast down a second temple on Jerusalem. Then let them which are in Judea flee into the mountains. What does it say? Them, let them which are in Judea. Meaning when this war is starting to compass, get the hell out of there before your bull walked in and destroyed. That's what it's saying on a contextual level. But on a spiritual level, right? I mean, men have, this is twofold. This is talking about Jacob's trouble, America, the things that are coming to pass in a spiritual way that is double to that which is, as well as contextual what's going on and what has happened during the Roman siege. Let them which are in Judea flee into the mountains. Now, the mountains that they were fleeing into during this time, right, is called the Jewish diaspora. That's a lucky for the pronunciation. You had the exile, the Hellenistic, and then the Roman. Right? Now, the exile, we fled into Egypt and to the west parts of Africa. You could read about that in history. Then I'm not going to say the Negro fled into the west parts of Africa. You may get that in here, historic in books and things like that. But in history, you do have the Jewish diaspora, right? Which was 70 AD. So it shows you in history that we fled. These are the Jewish so-called routes, which Jewish is just pertaining to the Jews, the routes the Jews took. It's how we ended up in a lot of these places in the New Testament. It happened under the Seleucus dynasty, right? From the Old Testament, from the time of the Maccabees, right? We fled. You had a Jewish diaspora under Seleucus, and then you have another Jewish diaspora during the time of 70 AD, where it's showing you that we're fleeing into parts of Africa. Now, it's not going to get so deep where the arrow just goes all the way like this and it goes to west part, then it goes all the way to Mississippi. That from Mississippi, your children and your family kind of went all the way over here. It's not going to get that deep. Now, diaspora is a Greek word that means scattered. What people are known for being scattered, man? The Israelites. The Israelites are known for being scattered, right? We're a scattered people when you're going into this history. Right? It says scattered. The Jewish diaspora refers to the movement of Jews right? Salakia. Referred to the movement of Jews out of their traditional lands and locations throughout the world, right? Let me get this real fast. It's another one. So you have the Roman Empire, the Parthian Empire, Jerusalem, dispersion of the Jews, and major Jew communities and ancient synagogues. So we're showing you. Now, the dispersion of the Jews is the era. It's showing you from Jerusalem, we fled downward as well, as in the other parts of Greece and Babylon. So everybody didn't come right to Africa. Right? This diaspora on a deeper level, really covered a large amount of where the Jews are today. Let's go back to Luke. Luke chapter 21 and verse 21 and 21. Let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, right? And let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. Why? Because you're not going to be able to get out of there. Now, during this Roman siege and attack, you have something called sling stones that they had during the time. Now, I'm going to see if I can get that real fast. Roman sling stones. It's like your modern day missiles, man. Let's see. Roman siege. See if we could pull up a picture. Exactly. This is exactly what I want. These are your sling stones, right? That they would have. And they would sling these things and then it would hit the walls. It's like your modern day missile, right? And they would sling it and they would try to break down the walls to try to get into Jerusalem. And that was part of their tactics to get in there, right? And they had one of the biggest battering rams. It's also called a battering ram. Let me get that real fast. Let's see. This is perfect. It's exactly what it is. These are your battering rams. So they take the sling stones and the battering rams, and that's so evil that the head of it was an actual ram. And they called it the Nikon in history. So this damn ram head, right, that they're obsessed with, right, and rams and sorcery, they used, and it was a steel head made of, or steel as a ram called the Nikon, and then they would jam it and jam it to hit these walls. See if I could pull that up in history. Let me see. Romans. Let me see this real fast. Roman. Uh, okay. Not showing too much, but this was the actual name of the head of the ram, the Nikon. And that was actually their largest military weapon that they had in the Roman army when you're going into it. Right? Also called an enforcer. There are many names that they would call it, but their biggest weaponry was called the Nikon. Right? Right. Then you had the first wall destroyed, which was the third wall. Right? A couple days after the second wall. Let's go to it real fast. It says, verse 22, for these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. Right? Read about that in Daniel, the 9th chapter. See, the Lord spoke about this all throughout prophecy. That's why remembering the days of old, from the time of Daniel, from the time of the New Testament to the time we living in now, right? Yahushua made this twofold. So as we read this, we have to really consider the things that are going to come to pass in the days of vengeance that are for to come, which is the third abomination of desolation, the real destroying of the temple, the elect, right? This is the book of Daniel, chapter 9, and verse 25. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, right from the time we got the restoring, from the time of Cyrus II, right, to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the prince shall be 7 weeks, right, when you're going into it, and 62 weeks. The street should be built again, and the wall even in troublous times, and that came to pass. Right? They were hindered during the time of Cyrus, but continued during the time of Darius. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. So it's even calling the Lord the Messiah, right, in the scriptures. Right? For all you Old Testament onlys, you can't break this down. Who's the anointed? It's not talking about David. It says, and the people of the prince are the Romans. They're the people of the prince. Now, whether you look at it as the prince of this world, right, meaning governing kingdom, or the prince of the people, really talking about Satan. You can read about that in John chapter 6 and verse 11. Let me get this real quick. Right, the God of this world is Satan. They're the prince of the people. It's talking about the Romans. It says, of judgment, because the prince of this world is judged. Who's the prince of this world? It's not talking about Yahushua. He's not judged. Who's the prince of this world, man? Who governs this world on the left-hand side? Satan. Because you will have a kingdom and the princes that govern the kingdom on the left-hand side. It says the people of the prince shall be, Salakia, shall be destroyed, and the city, right, and the sanctuary. And the end thereof shall be a flood, right, meaning destruction. And until the end of the war, desolations are determined. The abomination of desolation came to pass and will be determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of a week shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease, right? And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Right? So all throughout Daniel, you have Micah, the 5th chapter. It's also prophesying the destruction of Jerusalem. Let me get this one quick precept. It's Micah chapter 5 and verse number 5. And this man shall be the peace, talking about Yahushua, when the Assyrian is just a name for a man of high stature and renowness, right? You have the rod of the Assyrian that's broken. The Assyrian, the rod of my anger. The book of Isaiah, chapter 10 and verse 5. There are many precepts. Even Adam was known as an Assyrian, right? The Assyrian, the high up one in Ezekiel, right? The 31st chapter. Shall come into our land, and when he shall tread in our palaces. What is our palaces? Our temples. The rooms in our temple, the different palaces and places that we had, they invaded. Then shall we raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 principal men. A shepherd is a leader and a guider of the people, 7 being completion, and 8 being infinite, principal men meaning the elect. These are the shepherds and the principal men in the latter days under Yahushua that we're going to raise up against him and destroy him with. And they shall waste the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of Nimrod and the entrances thereof. Thus shall he deliver us from the Assyrian, when he cometh into our land, and he shall tread within our borders. That's exactly what happened, man. He treaded within our borders. Going back to the book of Luke, right, chapter 21, and I'm going to go back to verse number 22, right? And it reads, for these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe to them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. For there shall be a great distress in the land, and wrath amongst the people. Going into history too, they were throwing down babies, cutting them in half, ravishing them, killing them, murdering them. They had over 30, so like 60,000 soldiers, man. It was at nighttime, ambush, right before the Passover. So you know they caught us. It says, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword and should be led away captive into all nations. Now, going into history too, and it's a whole lot of history. This will be a 7-part series if I could really dive into all the history that actually happened. Now, the slaves that they made slaves, they caught, they often put them in games, the Roman games like Gladiator. They would take these men and they will put them in games. Like you have Gladiator, will put them in those arenas, right, to be bread and circus for the inhabitants thereof. They also would crucify. I believe we read that earlier, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but they would actually take men and they would crucify them, and they would put them up right before the fortresses when they built us in and we couldn't leave. If you would try to leave, they would have all of the men that were crucified upon all of the land, right? Which was a warning that you can't leave and what would happen if you did, right? I mean, there was so much torture tactics that happened. It says, and we should be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem should be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So there's a set measure in time that affliction has to arise under the hand of Esau that the Most High sets us free. Let's go to the book of Revelation, chapter 11. The book of Revelation, chapter 11. This whole thing is fire. And I'm going to start at verse, I don't want to read too much. I'm going to start at 7. And when they shall have finished their testimony, right, the elect, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, the beast shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, man, out of Europe, right? We know who that beast is, and make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them, meaning get destroyed and killed, right? Ravished. The same things that were prophesied in Luke chapter 21 is what's going to happen when you read the book of Revelation, the 12th chapter, Revelation, the 11th chapter. Many precepts talk about the destruction, 2nd Ezra, the 16th chapter, going into them trying to wage war and destroy us. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt, right? That's twofold, meaning at a dead like a state of our people, not knowing who they are, laying dead in the streets, because without the breath of life, you're dead. Without a quickening spirit of Yahweh Shem Yahushua, you are dead, right? But on another fold, our dead bodies are going to lie in these streets, man, of the great city. The great city is Babylon, through the destruction of the so-called white man, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt. Why? Because the Lord is going to rain fire and brimstone the same way he did in ancient Sodom. Egypt, because the same way we were delivered out of ancient Egypt is the same way the Lord is going to deliver his elect. So it's spiritually called the place of our first bondage, which is going to be our last bondage and our deliverance, and a place of destruction, which is what? A memorial for an unbelieving soul, the pillar of salt and the destruction which have come in the past, where also our Lord was crucified. How was he crucified? Because his image was crucified. He didn't physically crucify Yahweh Shai in America, but his image, his likeness, the spirit of salvation for the Jews. Everything he stood for is crucified right in his land, right? It makes you not even want to serve the Lord because you think of choirs, old women, and church pews and Tyler Perry movies. Everything is crucified of the Lord. And they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies, right? So, I mean, when you read this, these nations, they hate us. They're not for us. We have no salvation or help in this land, right? Going back to Luke, right? Chapter 21 and verse 25. And there should be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves wrong. So the context is switching in the spirit, right? It's going from the siege, but it's segueing in until the times of vengeance and the third abomination and desolation in verse number 25. And there should be signs in the sun, blood moons, right? And in the moon, you got eclipses, right? Blood moons, you got all of these different things. And in the stars, right? The stars, right? You're seeing different things leading you. And upon the earth, distress of nations. right? Wars, tumults, uprises, right? All these different things that be going on like they are in Syria right now. See, Syria right now is up in flames. All hell is breaking loose in Syria, if you don't know. And perplexity, right? Everybody's confounded. They don't know which way to go. Who should I believe? Who should I serve? And the sea and the waves roaring, right? The sea are the nations roaring against one another. Men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. So these things are going to be shaken when all hell breaks loose in the days to come. Right now, going back into what we were diving into, after the first Jewish-Roman War, you had in history called the Ticos War or the Second Jewish-Roman War, right? Now I'm going to dive a little bit into this. It says the Kikos War was a Jewish uprising in the province of Judea during the late 110 CE, right? It says ancient Jewish sources date it 52 years after Vespasian's war, right? From 66 to around 73. And this war lasted the 70 AD First Jewish Roman War around what scholars would say around 4 months and 3 weeks. That's what they would say, right? It says in 16 years before the Bar Kokhba revolt. Now, Salakia, the Bar Kokhba revolt was around 132 to 136 CE. This man went off, Bar Kokhba, right? And I wanted to touch a little bit into this, right? And he was a leader of the people. Now, after his revolt, like I said, you had the 70 AD, the First Jewish Roman War. You had a lot of wars going into the so-called white man, stemming after his hatred, violating our laws of God, stealing our money, governing us wickedly, being an off spirit, you know. I want to dive into this. Now, this man thought himself to be the Messiah, and he led a lot of men away captive. That's why when you read the book of Matthew, chapter 24 and 24, where you have contextual things the Lord is speaking about, and then you have things that are twofold. You have prophecies and you have things in context. It's beautiful to know all of the prophecy. It's beautiful to know it in the spirit, but it's harder to know things that actually are in history that happen. Because see, the Lord can show you all and anything, but it takes a lot more what they would call a scholarship to dive into these things. And as the children of Israel, we have to know these things. So when the Lord was talking about false Christ and false prophets arising, what was going on during the time of Yahweh? Like we was going into, you had the taxation, the revolts, you had the different sets, and the Lord is telling you that when 70 AD comes in, you're going to have the destruction of your people. Everybody's going down. You're fleeing into the mountains. And also, you're going to have false Christ arising, false leaders of the people saying that the Messiah has returned. That actually happened in history, going into the second Jewish Roman War. Right? Let me get this real fast. I'm going to start at this whole thing is fire. Not going to read too much. Right? This is Matthew chapter 24. Right? And I'm going to start at verse 23. Right? And it reads, then if any man shall say unto you, lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. For there shall arise false Christ. And that's happening now. You have your false, what is the name? Yaju, right? Low level fool, low level demon, right? I mean, you actually have men that followed men that Yahweh was actually talking about, not just foolish antics. Yeah, a man coming up the camp with his hat crooked, saying he's the Christ. Nobody believes you. Nobody cares. You actually had men that people follow, like we went into earlier, Thaddeus, Judas of Galilee, right? Judah and Simon in 46 CE. You actually had rebellions of the people that people believed and followed after. Yeah, Yahweh Shah is talking about these low-level demons, but he's also talking about actual false prophets that, if it were possible, could deceive the very elect. That means that these men had to really know something, had to really be moving in a type of spirit of deception, higher than chilling in your living room, huh? Right? flicking your fingers around, huh? It says, "For there shall arise false Christ and false prophets, and shall shew great signs and wonders, and so much that if it were possible, that they shall deceive the very elect." I mean, if the Lord then put the spirit on the elect to have such wisdom, to have discernment, to rightly divide the words of truth and what's going on, that a lot of men would be led away, and destroyed. Right now, you have Barth Koba, right? Says was a Jewish leader who led a bitter but unsuccessful revolt, right, against the Roman dominion in Judea. Right. Let me see if I can get a little bit more on him. Right. Let me see if I could pull this up in history. That this man thought himself to be the Christ. Like I said, it's a whole lot. I may not be able to click every single link and dive into every single thing. All right, there we go. Let me see. Said, let me see. Barth Koba, son of a lie, resigned in the 3.5 years, then said to be Rabbi Salaki. Bear with me. All right, there we go. Barth Koba was appointed prince of the rebels, provisional state, and much of the Judean popularity, right? Publius regarded him as the Messiah of Judah, who would restore the Jewish nation independence. So people were so thirsty for salvation. They were so thirsty to destroy the Romans that they follow all of these sets. See, the Jewish-Roman war is just deeper than us just fighting. We're fighting for our land. Yeah, we're fighting for our land, but you had a lot of sets, division, and a lot of false Christs that arise and a lot of false prophets out of what was going on. See, the Lord told me we ought to do this. This is the plan. If you have them 50,000 men behind you, 30,000 men saying, Khan, I mean, that'll put a spirit on any man. Who is this man? Where did he come from? Only such wisdom will ascend from on high. Only such wisdom would ascend on a man to have all of Israel. Who am I to deny the works of God? A spirit could hop on the most simplest man or the most wisest man. That's why the Lord said, even the very elect. We're not going to believe if it's a man doing miracles in a wilderness somewhere that's Yahweh when the Lord said he shall ascend, man, right? And you shall see him even from the east, right? As the thunder from the east to the west, so is the coming of the Son of Man, paraphrased. So we're going to see Yahweh coming in all glory. Acts chapter 1 and verse 9, as he ascended, the same way he's coming back down. It's not going to be a mystery. It says, him, the Messiah of Judah, will restore the Jewish independence. That's why when Yahweh came on the scene, you had a lot of people saying what? Why were people in Matthew, the 21st chapter, calling Yahweh Susanna, Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna? And it was a big parade when the Lord came into town. Why? Because they thought that Yahweh was going to restore the kingdom back to Israel. They thought that he was coming for salvation. His name is salvation. And they thought at that time he would restore and take back the kingdom from the Romans. It's the book of Matthew, chapter 21. And I'm going to start at, I might as well read this whole thing, right? I'm going to start at verse number 9. It says, and the multitudes that went before that followed cried, saying, Hosanna, the son of David. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. Right? So why are they saying this? Let's go to the blue letter. Let's find out what this is talking about. Matthew chapter 21. And let's dive in. Right? Straight to the point. Right? Hosanna means what? Oh, save. So they're screaming, save us. That's literally what they call in the Lord, man. And that's the spirit they're in during that time as they're beseeching the King of Kings, man. So I'm gonna read this again. And the multitudes that went before and that followed cry, saying, Hosanna, meaning save us to the Son of David. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Save them from who? From what? The Romans. Hosanna in the highest. And when he was coming to Jerusalem, all the city was moved, saying, Who is this? And the multitude said, This is Yahushua, the prophet of Nazareth of Galilee. And Yahushua went into the temple of God and cast out all them that sold. Right? So the point is that even during that time, look, they wanted Yahushua to come to save. Even in the book of Acts, the first chapter, without again restore the kingdom back to Israel. This is the spirit that was going around. So it's not easy. So like it's not hard to think that these men got led away by all these uprisings because it was unclear what was going to happen until the simple, but not unto the elect. It's the book of Acts, chapter 1 and verse. I'm gonna read this whole thing is fire. I'm gonna start at 5. Right? I'm gonna start at 4. It says, and being assembled together with them, commanded them that they should not depart from Jerusalem, but wait for the promise of the Father, which saith he have heard of me. John truly baptized with water, but ye shall baptize with the Holy Ghost not many days hence. Right? It says, when they therefore came together, they asked him, saying, Lord, wilt thou at this time restore again the kingdom of Israel? So the disciples want to know when they're going to restore the kingdom. The kingdom isn't just talking about, it's not talking about a fairy tale land where you bounce from cloud to cloud. It's not the kingdom of Israel. A kingdom is a rulership. When are we going to be back on top? When are the Romans going to stop oppressing us? That's what everybody's asking. You read about that in Luke, the first chapter, that we may be saved from our enemies by the hand of all that hate us, paraphrasing greatly. So even from Zacharias to the 12, to men asking Yahushua in secret, to him coming into town, everybody saying, Save us. Everybody wanted to escape the Romans. It says, and he said unto them, It is not for you to know the times nor the seasons, man, which the Father hath put in his own power. Meaning, don't worry about that right now. It says, But ye shall receive power after that the Holy Ghost has come upon you. Meaning, it's more work to do. And ye shall be witness unto me both in Jerusalem and into all Judea and in Samaria and into the uttermost parts, right, of the earth, right? So going into the times these were written and the time they came out, this is very important. In that history, you have to know it, right? So going from this man, like I said, there was a revolt and what they would call the second, right, Roman Jewish war. Now, where did the Jews go after the Romans sent them out of Judea? We went into it. I kind of jumped the gun a little bit earlier. But they went into present day Egypt, down into the west parts of Africa, Mesopotamia, modern day Iraq, Greece, Turkey, right, North Africa, right, Italy, Spain, and parts of the Middle East during the Jewish diaspora. Right, but let me get this last closing precept. And most high willing, no, this was edifying through the spirit. And history don't just start on the surface. Don't ever be scared to keep digging, man. You're only gonna find more of things that are not true that you could cut up to help men that may fall that path, or find more things that are edifying to teach and show, to validate history, prophecy, and context in the scriptures. So you most definitely want to continue to dig. You never know, somebody may come up and ask you these things. Because a lot of people regurgitate doctrine, right? That they don't even know how to break down themselves. Never teach something you don't know to be true for yourself. A lot of young men come into camps, and a lot of men, they watch elders or popular men and they start to follow the spirit that they're in, whether good or bad, only the Lord knoweth, and they get confused. Or they start to believe every word out of this man's mouth as if it's the Most High. And the things that he regurgitates to another man or teaches or lays in his heart to be true may not be, right? Whether it be history or whether it be the words of the Lord. So you want to rightly divide the word of truth. And like I always say, never break down something if you can't break down every line. It'll be wise for you to continue to go over it to gain that understanding later on. It's nothing more beautiful than breaking down and handling the word of life the way it ought to be handled. They didn't just take Yahweh's body and put it in the ground, man. They laid it up with linen, the manner of the Jews, with the frankincense and the myrrh. It was a way to handle this book. So it's always a way through the spirit you understand to handle this. Right? Let me get that quick precept real fast. First John chapter 1 and 1. It says that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked upon, and our hands have handled the word of life. So your hands have handled it, man. You got people that are rough, people that are frivolous. You got broken pencils and snap erase markers, and your journal all ripped up. And you have people that handle things with care, right? Which is the truth. It says, for the life was manifested, and we have seen it, and bear witness, and shewed unto you that eternal life, which was with the Father, and was manifest unto us, where Yahweh Shai the King. Right? But let me get this last closing precept. Let's go to the mighty book of Revelation. Right? Chapter 3, in verse number 2. Be watchful and strengthen the things which remain that are ready to die. For I have not found thy works perfect before Yahweh. Remember therefore how thou hast received and heard, and hold fast, and repent. If therefore thou shalt not watch, I will come in thee as a thief, and thou shalt not know what hour I will come upon thee. So continue to keep watch, continue to be on fire, continue to study and do the works of the Most High. And Lord willing, this was edifying. I want to give all honor and glory to the Most High Yahweh. By Hashem Mashiach Malak Yahushua. Shalom.